verbs in German, an extremely important category of verb. Firstly, what are modal verbs? Well, simply put, they only appear with another verb because they change the mood of the second verb. In other words, they express how someone feels or what someone thinks about the other verb. Here are two examples in English. Firstly, the sentence, I am playing basketball. That contains a simple action, but if we want to express a desire about that action, we add in the verb want. I want to play basketball. Similarly, in our second sentence, I am wearing a school uniform. If we want to add another flavour, another sense to that first verb, wearing or am wearing, and in this case, obligation, we say, I have to wear a school uniform. Notice in both of these sentences, we've added a second verb. The 5 most important modal verbs in German are können, müssen, dürfen, wollen, and sollen. Each of these verbs expresses a mood which affects the other verb. The first one, können, expresses ability. We translate this into English with can or to be able to. The second one, müssen, expresses compulsion, must or to have to. The third one, dürfen, expresses permission, may or to be allowed to. The fourth one, wollen, expresses desire, want or to want to. And finally, the fifth one, sollen, expresses obligation, should or to be supposed to. Now we need an overview of the conjugation of modal verbs. What do we mean by conjugation? It's just the ending that we put on this verb depending on who is speaking. We have 6 categories of people, and for each of these people, we need to know what ending the verb has. Notice the pattern that emerges. Firstly, with können, ich kann, du kannst, sie, es kann, wir können, ihr könnt, and sie können. The last 3, the plural endings, können, könnt, and können, are perfectly regular. You don't need to memorize anything different about those, but the first 3, the singular endings, are different. Notice in the red, kann and kann are exactly the same, which is not usual for German. Usually, of course, the ich ending is e and the sie, es ending is t, but not with modal verbs. The word in blue, kannst, has changed in a different way, and that is the vowel has changed from to simply an a. Notice the pattern progress with all the other verbs. Ich muss, du musst, sie, es muss, wir müssen, ihr müsst, sie müssen. Ich darf, du darfst, sie, es darf, wir dürfen, ihr dürft, sie dürfen. Ich will, du willst, sie, es will, wir wollen, ihr wollt, sie wollen. And finally, ich soll, du sollst, sie, es soll, wir sollen, ihr sollt, sie sollen. It's really important that you memorize these patterns, which should not take a lot of time initially, but will be an incredibly important investment for the rest of your German. If you memorize this table, then you'll be able to say, for example, without hesitating, we can, wir können, or you should, du sollst, or I'm allowed to, ich darf. And that's the whole point of memorizing the ending, so that you can say it spontaneously without hesitation. There are a couple of important word order rules to bear in mind when we use these verbs. The first one is a familiar rule. The first verb in the sentence, the conjugated one, the one with the ending, goes in the second position always, without exception. But there are a couple of special modal verb rules. When you use a modal verb, the second verb in the sentence, the other one, firstly appears in the infinitive or dictionary form. That means it has an en at the end. Secondly, it goes right to the end of the sentence. And thirdly, it does not have a zu before it, like you might say in English, to. Of course, there are other German verbs that appear with a second verb. And in the case of these verbs, there is a zu before the second verb. For example, planen or vorhaben, to plan or to intend, scheinen, to seem, hoffen, to hope, versuchen, to try or attempt. So don't get confused with these verbs. These verbs do need a zu, but modal verbs never have a zu after them. Here's a worked example. Hoffentlich darf ich am Samstagabend mitkommen. Hopefully, I'm allowed to come along on Saturday evening. Notice firstly our familiar rule, the conjugated verb is in second position, darf. Secondly, notice that the verb mitkommen, the second verb, goes right to the end of the sentence. Thirdly, notice that there is no zu before mitkommen. And finally, notice that mitkommen ends with en. That's the infinitive or dictionary form of the verb, which you'll find when you look up a dictionary. In our worked example, we saw dürfen in action, but let's look at examples of each modal verb in action. Firstly, können. Ich kann leider nicht helfen. Unfortunately, I can't help. Mein Bruder muss jeden Tag trainieren. My brother has to train every day. Du darfst noch nicht ins Kino allein gehen. You're not allowed to go to the cinema alone yet. Sie wollen unbedingt nach Australien gehen. They want to absolutely go to Australia. Du sollst ihn zurückrufen. You should ring him back. Notice that all of these ideas that are expressed through modal verbs are really important ideas that come up every day. And that's why it's best to learn them well and learn them early in your study of German.